Neural organization technique, or N.O.T. as it's abbreviated, is exactly what it says in its name. It's a specific protocol to correct and reset the central nervous system if it's in a state of disorganization. Its founder, Dr. Carl Ferrari, was one of the first chiropractors in the United States back in the mid-60s using applied kinesiology and the muscle testing phenomenon. He was dissatisfied with the fact that in his practice he would do corrections, didn't matter which techniques, and he had taken many different techniques and applied them in his practice, but sometimes the problem would keep returning. The symptoms sometimes would go away, but when he'd use muscle testing to verify if the circuit was on or off, the problem would start to show that it was going into deficit again. So through trial and error and through Dr. Ferrari's curious and inquisitive mind, he was asking the question, why would it return? He had the belief system that we are all born with a basic operating system. Just like a computer comes with a basic operating system, we are born with some basic circuitry and programs to function in the jungle. And therefore, he said, there has to be a manual for the human body. There has to be a sequence of programs and corrections of how the body works. Just like if you take the back off a television set or open up an electrodomestic product, you see a mishmash of circuits and it looks like you can't make sense out of it. But actually, whoever built that product, the television or the computer, they know exactly how they built this thing and how the current starts at the beginning, through the wall, through the electrical, and then runs through and ends with the final product, whether it's a TV providing the image, etc. You get the idea. So what Dr. Ferrari found through muscle testing and 10 to 15 years of clinical research on all kinds of conditions is that there were certain sequences and corrections to correct individual conditions. For example, there might have been 4 circuits or 4 reflexes that always seemed to go into deficit, which produced the symptom of either bedwetting or frequent urination or incontinence. So the symptoms might change as the child who was a bedwetter now becomes a frequent urinator. They've learned to control it somewhat, and then as they get later in life, it's becoming incontinence. But the same circuits were never being corrected. So the problem was still there, it was just exhibiting as different symptoms. So he learned how to correct that, and he found that even within those 4 points, they had to be corrected in a certain sequence. So it's very specific. It is computer reprogramming for the human nervous system. It's genius. And so after time, what he found when he had these individual programs for how to correct neck and shoulder problems, what shows up in migraine, what shows up in learning disabilities, he believed that what causes most of these health conditions are that the body took a trauma and went into neural disorganization. Most of the time that's a physical trauma, but there are things such as emotional traumas, or chemical traumas, such as an assault of medications, drinking too much, or drugs. These can overload the nervous system. But primarily, what happens, the body goes into disorganization, just like overloading a circuit board in a house. Science has shown that all humans and some animals exist with 3 basic sets of circuitry, or 3 survival systems. They are known as the fight and flight or defense system, the digestive system, how we take in, process, eliminate food, and the hormonal or endocrine system, not only how we reproduce our species, which is the sexual systems, but also things like blood pressure, blood sugar, etc. Well, the fight-flight system involves an intricate mechanism of how we protect the brain and spinal cord. Normally, the 29 bones form a pumping action, as do the upper vertebra and the tailbone, and this creates a cranial sacral pump. This is normal. And in normal organization, what most human beings are born with is they are neurologically in balance with the programs or circuits that control the defense system, the digestion, and the hormonal system. This is where we want a patient when we're finished with them. What happens in normal neurology is when the animal, for example, needs food, the brain will turn up power to the areas that control the digestive programming. And so the body is doing this, not this. So what it does is turns down or suppresses the neurology because it's putting more neurology to doing what's needed in the jungle at that time. In this example, digestion. So the animal takes in the food and fills up the stomach. Or equally, you could say, evacuates the bowel if that was what was needed. But what happens is now the body says, you've tripped the switch, you've satisfied what I wanted in the jungle, and now the neurology drops down and the power returns back to the fight-flight system and the hormonal system, and you're back ready in the jungle for the next thing. Now I'm going to run for the bus. I'm going to, go play football. Well, this involves traumas and shocks and forces to the body. And the brain and spinal cord cannot be relaxed in there and sloshing around, or it will cause damage to the central nervous system. So instinctively, what animals do is lock the muscles of the jaw, tighten the neck muscles, and throw the tail up in the air. And what we've found is this is to tighten up the brain and spinal cord inside the hard, bony protective shell and put you into the defense system. Turn up the adrenaline and get ready for the trauma. How do we come out of defense? We cry, we yell, we run for mama. These are reset mechanisms that we all have within us. This is why we aren't all walking around neurologically disorganized for every little trauma we have. We have an automatic reset capability. Our job in neural organization technique is to find out if they're stuck in defense or if they're stuck in disorganization, and then know how to systematically and in order go down and reset the circuits the way the body was designed. And this is the genius of what Dr. Ferrari found. You start at A and you finish at Z. And what he found theoretically is the defense or fight-flight system is the cause of the problem. They go up into defense, maybe didn't see the corner of the cupboard or the table, or they fell out of the crib, or they fell off their bicycle when they were 4 years of age. These are normal traumas that we sustain. But if the body wasn't ready for it, if it didn't see it coming, or if it was too much of a force, this could be an overload on the nervous system, and usually is. Now the body says, I am a weaker animal in the jungle. I am neurologically disorganized. I could not get myself out of defense. I could not self-reset. So now I must always be ready until somebody can help me to properly reset it, which is what we do in neural organization technique. But if this is not corrected, the body will stay in the defense system for survival reasons. It has to be ready for the next trauma because that could be the last. And the innate intelligence is always trying to keep you alive in the jungle while you're doing your journey here on Earth. The sad part of this now is that the symptoms might be there as the years progress of a tight neck, tight shoulder, tight jaw, etc., headaches. This is all the defense system. Emotionally, they're on defense, so we call this hyperactive children. Or why are you so sensitive? But now what happens is that the digestive system is not receiving as much energy, nor is the hormonal system, or some of the learning or higher functions that we learned later in life, like balance, reading, writing, directionality. And so all these begin to show deficits, and we never link it all up. We have individual specialists for this, that, we learn different techniques, and it's sort of like we're playing hit or miss. The intention is to help the patient, and that's good, but we're missing something, and that is, are we starting at neutral? Is the laptop reset properly before I start putting other applications into it? And that is what neural organization technique is all about. We can help anybody because most people are stuck in neural disorganization, in my experience, in the first 5 years of life. And they go for the next 20 to 30 to 40 years with other conditions. You must get them out of fight-flight first. And that involves first correcting the cranium, then the jaw, then the tailbone. Then, once the person is reset, you can go back and start finding success with other therapies. Traditional musculoskeletal therapies like chiropractic, physiotherapy, massage, or emotional-based trauma therapies. Or you can also find that their hormonal system will come into balance, so you can reduce or eliminate some of their medications or creams or things that they were using as an external means to keep their hormonal system in balance. And plus, with things like learning and learning disabilities, they are now able to notice, I can read and I can remember what I'm reading. So you have complete control over helping patients of all kinds of conditions. And the beauty of this is they don't need to have symptoms. This is a technique that everybody should come in and get done. It's usually completed if you're proficient in 1 to 3 treatments. That does not mean every condition will eliminate, but at least you know that you have reset the central nervous system and it's holding. Because once you reorganize the system, it does not usually return. They may have a new trauma, which would warrant them coming back for a new examination, but that would be for this new trauma, not going back to fix an old trauma that keeps coming back.